It is now 4:31 in the PM, and I will call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of today's agenda, and the recommendation is that the agenda for the Municipal Heritage Committee meeting dated November 12, 2024 be approved as circulated. Moved by Judy Humphreys, seconded by Randy Jorgensen, and push your buttons. Somewhere. Where's my button?
Richard, you have to vote?
Yep. Hit your yes button. Richard's already done that.
There you go.
And it would appear that all are in favor. The motion is carried. Does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? We're all looking at Richard for our disclosure. No? Next is the approval of minutes and the minutes of the October 8th, 2024 meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Municipal Heritage Committee meeting dated October 8, 2024 be approved as circulated. Glenn Silver makes the motion, and Richard Tatley seconds. Get your buttons ready, ladies and gentlemen. And everyone has said yes, so that is approved. We have no deputations today, as far as I know. And we will move into working group reports. First one being Built Heritage Awards Working Group by Paul Cook. Paul has been in touch with me. He is out in the Lewisham area looking for Bambi. But in his last report that he made in October, he recommended 3 properties. And I'd like you to make a note of these 3 properties. They are, thanks to Judy, 771 Bay Street, 550 Wagner Street, and 325 McPherson Street in West Gravenhurst. Paul's hope was that you would all visit those properties before our meeting in December so that we could vote on them at that meeting. But we are not going to have a meeting in December, so Paul is going to call for a meeting of his working group so that you can all meet after seeing these properties and vote on them, so that at our January meeting, it is a unanimous presentation from the working group for us to take a vote, as opposed to spending an hour discussing it. So please take some time between now and when Paul wants to have that meeting, which will probably be around the second week of December, and visit those properties and give some thought to whether or not you think they would qualify for a Heritage Award. Any questions about that? Glenn?
I pressed my button.
So you let him speak?
Oh, and Judy too. Go ahead, Glenn.
Just, can anybody just fill me in on what we're looking for when it comes to built heritage stuff? When we look at these properties, are they supposed to be brought up to par? Or are they just, like if they're in disrepair, do they still get a Built Heritage Award, or how does that work?
Most usually, it is a property that has undergone some renovation and brought up to community standards, but also in keeping with the properties around them, in keeping with their original heritage design and things like that.
Okay.
Mary has something to say about that. Right, Mary? Go ahead. Oh, I probably have to push Mary's button. Go ahead.
I think you've explained it quite well, Michael.
Okay.
There is some written criteria I can send you, Glenn, if you'd like. But Michael has summarized it quite well.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Oh, Judy has something to say. Yes, Judy?
I was just going to mention that, in fact, if you don't have time to drive around those properties, if you simply Google them, you'll be able to call up a picture of each property and take a look at it. So it's another way of doing this. And you can get, if you use Google, you can actually get side views of the property as well as face on and so on. So it's just an easier way if you don't happen to want to drive around the countryside doing this.
Oh, good idea. Thank you. And Glenn, they all aren't always at a long-standing property that's being renovated. There are a couple of buildings that got Heritage Awards from us. One that strikes me immediately is the A. LePage building down by what used to be the Home Hardware Giant Tiger Plaza. It was built brand new, but in doing so, they created something that fit right in with everything around it. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Oh, your turn, Glenn. Properties of interest.
Okay, it's obvious that the government that's in power in Toronto right now has lowered heritage to just about the lowest point that they could lower it as far as priorities are concerned. At least that's my opinion. We've met as a committee, as a subcommittee, and we've talked about different things that we have to do to really stay on top of heritage and designating heritage, as it were. So some of the things that we came up with were, we have to work closely with the signage committee, of course, because once the decision is made to the style of plaque or the style of storyboard, we're going to keep it standard right across the board. We're currently going through properties that have already been designated in Gravenhurst, just to check those plaques out, and they look a little bit like this, some of them. And we're going to take some pictures and make sure that these properties are properly honored. One of the things that happened this summer was that the Severn Hotel was de-designated.
What? Oh, Severn Inn.
The Severn Inn, I'm sorry. And we still see it on the list of designated properties, and we're just wondering if we could request that that gets removed.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I can address that.
Okay.
So the register is a council-approved document, so it does need to be removed, and typically we have waited until there are a number of things that need to be done to remove that, but certainly that's a reasonable request and something that I will strive to get done in the next, in the short term.
Okay, I appreciate that. We found that the storyboards that we've put up in town, the ones that are closest to the building seem to be the safest, not getting touched or not getting vandalized or anything like that. So we thought that maybe that might be a criteria in the future, that we maybe keep the storyboards closer to the buildings. I don't know why that is, but it seems that way. We need to have something to work with financially. And I don't know, Randy, from council, is it possible to have a line item budget for these plaques that we decide to work with, so that we know how much money we have to work with, and eventually we'll know exactly how much each of these different types of plaques cost and how many properties we could actually honor each year? Just putting that to you.
Ready?
In a word, it's budget time. I think that's probably the opposite in that, in terms of the work plan, if we decide we're gonna come forward in plaque, we should be coming up with an estimate for budget on what that needs to look like.
And how many of them we want to have?
And how many we wanna have, and an idea of what they're gonna cost before, because we don't do budgeting based on, here's 50 grand, go wild. It's based on, what's brought forward as a proposal, and,
Yes, I would think something like, we've done an estimate on how much something like that costs. It costs $289. We'd like to put 5 of them up this year, so
Yeah.
we'd like $1,500 in the budget,
yeah.
and see if it gets approved.
And I think Ms. Jakarta has something to say, too.
Pardon me?
Angela has something to say.
Well, she should push her button. Push her button.
Perhaps I can just add that I would suggest that the way to think about a signage program is more of a big picture and not just within the confines of the Municipal Heritage Committee budget. And we have talked about this a few times before, but I would clarify that typically, but not always, committee's budget has paid for the production of the sign and not for the installation. And then where funds have been available within this committee's budget, it has been used in the past, but generally it has been, I'll use the word subsidized by other departments. So typically infrastructure for the installation, and just, I can give you a bit more idea about sign costs. I did get a quote from Riverside Brass, who is the company who has produced all of the other plaques that are made of, that are not wood. So the current price is $348 each, plus freight and tax. So I would suggest more than $400. The interpretive panel, for example, the Sloan panel itself, the cost of printing that on the Alu panel was about $125. It's the installation that is the real cost. So just to give you a sense of those costs, but again, I think it's important to not focus, to further what Councillor Jorgensen mentioned, it's not important to focus on how much money's available, but what the goals are, and then we can figure out potential options for working within that.
Good, thank you. Ready?
Just back on the registry question, I mean, we have a number of properties in there that aren't designated, but they remain on the registry. I'm suggesting, does the Severn River Inn have to come off the registry total? Or like, come off the registry, or just change the classification to not be designated anymore? Because it's still, it's still a significant building. It may not be officially designated, but I think there's value just keeping these on the list until we're told that they have to come off by the province, of course, but that's been extended.
Good question.
So,
And
Because I noticed there is a,
if it stays on list number 2,
well, it's all one list. The registry is one list, but we have the
well, some are
properties-
designated or some are not.
That's right.
So if they
It
move
says
from
right on the
designated
list
to
whether-
not designated,
Just-
are they going to be back in touch with us about their insurance?
Well, I don't see why, because, it's not, it's still on the list, but it's just not officially designated, and
Yep.
hence it doesn't have a protection under the Heritage Act, right? So that's just a question out there to decide, I guess, and Ange looks like she could go.
Yes, Judy?
I'll let Angela go first. Yeah.
Oh,
It's a good question. So I think that I might suggest that the Properties of Interest Working Group do contact the property owners before any action is taken. The action that was taken by the committee was to repeal the designation bylaw. My understanding would be that that removes this property from the register, but I can reach out to the province to confirm that, and I might suggest that if the plan is to re-add it as a listed property, then there should be some conversations with the owner as well, given historical practices of the committee to work with the property owner.
Yes, thank you. Judy?
I'm curious to know whether anybody has some sort of an idea of what the province is meaning when it's looking at listed versus designated. Because if the property is listed, it seemed to me that the provincial government was extending the period of time in which we could go from properties being listed to being designated. Does it mean that all the listed properties then have to be off that register if they haven't been designated by 2026? Because it seems to me we ought to be able to have a list of properties that are of interest to us, that are historical, that matter, but they're not going to be designated ever. But in fact, we want to make it known that the town has a list of these heritage properties. So does it have to be done outside of this register in order to do that? Because otherwise, it seems to me the government expects us to just clear off that list completely by 2026.
Yes, Angela.
You're correct that any listed properties that aren't designated by, I think it's now January 1st, 2027. So initially it was 2 years and then it was extended for another 2 years. So any properties that are on the register listed that are not designated by that date are removed from the register. There's nothing preventing municipalities or the Heritage Committee from keeping a list of their own list of properties of interest, keeping in mind that there's no legal status. The register gives legal status to properties.
Interesting. Good. Go ahead. Yeah, I gotta push this button. Go ahead.
We have discussed this as well, and it really comes down to putting together a program, a plaquing program, or an honoring program, or whatever we end up calling it within the municipality. We are going to certainly provide options to property owners, and notwithstanding designation, if that's what they want, but other options such as a storyboard or a plaque or whatever it may be. And that's really the direction that we think that we're headed. So once that occurs and once we're established that way, these names, these buildings that may end up coming off of the register because of non-designation will go on our honoring list and our honoring program and be there for that.
Yep.
Did I miss anything? Okay. Just the last thing that I wanted to mention from our standpoint is that we are going to go around to the currently designated buildings and take a look at the plaquing that they do have, take a picture of them, make sure that they're in a decent condition and where they are on their building, if they're on the building at all. And I think that's it.
And have you, as a committee, have you identified 3, 4, 5, 10 properties right now that
Yeah.
are on your target list?
They come right off of the registry, right off the registered list that we have for the town.
Which ones might they be?
We talked about the Orange Lodge. We talked about Brown's Beverages. I don't have them in front of me right now.
Angela has the list.
Oh, yeah, Angela's got them all here. Yep. Listed Laffner House, what else here? The Victorian, what is that, Maori House? Okay, all the ones that come right off the, oops, sorry, all the ones that come right off of the register. And then we'll move them over. Once we find from the property owners what they would like to do, what they would feel comfortable with without getting insurance involved and all the rest of the stuff that's going on these days, we'll put that forward, have them removed from the registry, and then we don't have to worry about it in 2027 or whenever it is.
Judy?
I started to do exactly what Glenn's talking about after our meeting, which is going around and taking a look to see whether or not the buildings that have been designated and plaqued still have their plaques, and if so, what shape they're in. And what I'm finding is that none of the plaques are on the exterior of any of the buildings. So right off the bat, if we thought they were going to be on the exterior, they ain't. So now I'm hoping, I guess, that I can get contact information from the town for the properties that we're looking at as to who to contact in each property to find out whether the plaque is inside and mounted and hanging up, or whether or not it's been put in a box and put under the stairwell. So I'm hoping that someone can tell me, and maybe Angela, whether or not I can get the pertinent person to, or the appropriate person to contact in the case of each of these homes and businesses, so that I can ask them the question, do you still have your plaque? Is it possible to do that? Or is that a privacy information problem?
Let's look through documentation. If they actively provide us the information, we'll release what we can.
Okay. We will release whatever information we can.
Okay. So if I can't get a contact name for someone regarding a particular property that has been designated and should be plaqued, what do I do then?
Let us look into it.
Okay.
Anything else, Glenn? Anything else for Glenn? No? Richard, we'd like to hear more about interpretive signs and plaques working group.
No. Again, nothing. Press.
Is current. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to affirm that a few days ago, the working group for heritage plaquing in Gravenhurst had a meeting on just last Saturday, and anyway, we came up with an agreement about a list of proposed criteria, so to speak, that would in effect determine how the basis on which we would recommend plaques or storyboards or things like that. And Judy has done an excellent job of making inquiries elsewhere, I think with the province or provincial heritage, to get an idea of what their standards are. And Judy has put together a list, so to speak, which I think it pretty well summarizes what our working group thinks or believes is appropriate. And if the committee as a whole agrees, I hope we'll be one step forward. Judy has just put it up for us now. So if anybody hasn't read it, you can read it now on the boards.
Pretty comprehensive.
Do you want Lindsay to go through it? Do you want Lindsay to go through the list, or do you?
I think we'll just let people read it on their own. Would you like her to read it out?
I can go through it and read it to people if they want.
Okay.
Okay, could you do that?
Okay, so there are 6 criteria listed. Here's one with several points to it. Plaques of an appropriate size and type, that meaning just that we're looking for consistency. So we want to be to conform to the bylaw for signs, but at the same time, we want to have a consistent approach to heritage plaques in the town. Secondly, the person, building, location, or event to be honored must have contributed in some way to the development of the town of Gravenhurst. And so we've given some ideas here. Significant person involved in starting, developing, or acquiring something that would enhance the development of the town of Gravenhurst. Or a significant meeting place. So we can talk about people this way, we can talk about locations. We can talk about an important event that in fact contributed to the development of the history and culture of the town, or a historic structure, and it doesn't have to be a building in that case. That structure could be something like a bridge, a gazebo, or whatever, so it doesn't have to be, we're not talking necessarily about a substantial building. The installation, if it's going to be on privately owned land, would have to meet with the approval of the property owner before we went ahead. We would have to keep these signs updated. So in other words, we would have to be responsible as a heritage committee for drawing attention to the fact that a sign has been vandalized, or that it's not weathered very well, or that the information about it has changed in some way. And then we would ask that the town would perhaps help us with making recommendations to improve or change that sign. The QR codes are going to be important, especially for, I think, well, not just, I started out thinking more for newcomers and visitors, but really, many of the residents of the community don't know the history of the town. So these QR codes are going to give the background to the reasons why these particular places, people, events have been chosen. And in conjunction with the staff, we would approach a local supplier who would hopefully be able to supply the appropriate plaques that we're looking for. And I think that basically summarizes what the committee work group had decided to do.
Thank you. Any questions? It's a pretty comprehensive list. Whoop, Randy has something to say, of course.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course. Just all heritage plaques will require QR codes, and I'm thinking of the metal bronze plaque or whatever, and I don't see a QR code working well on those. That's just my concern. I mean, the other part of the QR code is a QR code has to lead somewhere. So you have to have an online write-up. I guess that's implied by that too, but that would be what we would have to do for each of those. But anyway, that's just a comment that I don't know that a QR code would work well on the metal plaques, but.
So clarify for me, Randy, this difference between, say, this plaque over here and a metal plaque and,
Well, I'm talking about, like the cast, a plaque like that, the post office plaque, where are you gonna put a QR code, and what's it gonna look like, and how's it gonna work? Because that's just
is it
Different
possible,
beast.
is it possible to have an active QR code on that plaque?
like with a sticker or something?
Well, no.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I think that's it's just a little problematic. I don't know how we would do that. Maybe having a separate one or something.
So we may wish to modify that with,
Just
we will strive to have QR codes to provide background information
something like that, or, I mean, I don't.
as best we can.
I think it's more a logistical issue, I'm thinking.
Yes, Judy?
Are we suggesting that you can't do a QR code on a metal plaque?
On a cast.
No?
No? Okay.
Like, just have, you could have a separate,
Yeah,
separate
yeah.
one.
Somehow, but I'm not sure how that would look or whatever, so it might be better to strive rather than, yeah. And not always be able to do it. I'm not so sure that we're always going to be doing brass plaques. You know, I mean, those are not common to what we're talking about.
No, there's a QR code on Archie Sloan, isn't there?
Yes, there is,
Yeah,
but that's a storyboard, yeah,
Yes.
not a brass plaque, yeah.
Yep. Yes, Randy?
it's just, again, the wording, all heritage plaques, that, to me, is the plaque.
Yeah.
As opposed to the storyboard or a sign or something like that. We have plaques, in my mind, are the cast ones that are supposed to be on the outside of the building, but may not be, right, in general. So,
All heritage things.
well,
Signage, yeah, you could call it
well,
signage.
in fact, the title of the report just speaks to heritage plaques. It's really heritage signage, I think,
Yeah,
in
sure.
general, right?
We could change that.
But signage can be plaques and/or storyboards.
That's right.
Exactly, so. It's just specifically the plaque, that comes to mind for me
Yes.
as being one of the cast plaques that we've
Yeah.
already installed
Yeah.
on a number of designated buildings.
Understood. So is proposed criteria for heritage signage.
Yep.
That works?
Come back with revisions and officially adopt it at the next meeting? And we can have a motion prepared? Sure.
And I think that plaque should be, like throughout plaque should be replaced with sign.
Signage, yeah.
Do you want me to talk about procedure?
Got it,
Kayla,
yep. Got it,
You want me to talk about procedure about next steps?
terrific.
All right, thank you to the chair and council. I'm just gonna, some committee, usually I'm with council. So next steps, revisions can be made with this, and then at the next meeting, either January, if you decide not to have a December meeting, we could have the final with a motion to, that the committee adopt this as it, and that can be ready for you for for January meeting.
Terrific. Richard, is that it? Thank you. Any other questions for Richard or for Judy? Apparently not. Other reports, if any? I hear and see none. Now, there's some unfinished business with regards to the post office plaque. What do we have there, Angela?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the last meeting, members will recall there was a discussion about the ongoing question about replacing the plaque at the post office that was removed during the renovations. And I'm not sure, I think there was going to be some communications with Colin. I'm not sure how that went. But in the meantime, I just wanted to point out that Haley pointed out to me that one of these signs is located within the interior of the post office, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. So that is mounted on the wall. And in looking for this sign, I did find a plaque of sorts. It's not metal, it's wood. There's one letter that's a bit damaged, but regardless, this is available if committee wishes to pursue this as an option. And that, just reiterate that I did obtain a quote for getting a new metal plaque that would look the same as this, but again, be metal presumably for outside. And again, just noting that that cost would be $348 plus freight and tax.
with or without a QR code. Yes, Judy?
I did speak with Colin Old, one of the things that we had said somebody was going to do. I spoke with Colin Old about the post office plaque and the fact that it had gone missing during construction. Colin had multiple conversations with the post office and multiple times was told, how can I put this? That it wasn't anything that they really were concerned about and weren't particularly enthused about looking for the plaque that had gone missing. But I'm assuming that the plaque you've got, Angela, might have been a replacement that was made at that time, once we knew that in fact the plaque had been lost. Because, I don't know, I can't imagine why else we would have that here, because it did exist in the post office and then was lost by the construction company that did the work. So I'd like to see it go back in the post office. I don't think it has to be outside, and it would certainly reduce our cost tremendously if we didn't have to go with an outside plaque. Because it's a very public building, people are going to see it inside the building when they go in there. It's not the case for some properties, but it certainly would be the case with a post office.
Yep.
So I truly have no insight as to what this is. I could speculate. In all seriousness, I can contact my predecessor and see if there's any insight there. I indicated that one of the letters was damaged. It looks like more than one is a little bit damaged, but it certainly could be placed on the inside of the post office if that was something that they were willing to do.
Richard?
Mr. Chairman, I'm tempted to make a comment that's I'm climbing right on a hook, so to speak, when I say this, but I could conceive the possibility that somewhere along the way, a plaque committee might decide that they'd like to plaque something else on the post office on the same site. In other words, some earlier structure on the post office site, that's maybe a possibility, and then that would run into the problem, well, maybe we'll end up with too many plaques on or inside a building or something like that. And of course, I have no idea whether this will ever happen or not, but I could see, putting up some kind of signage for other things on the post office site at some future date, if people agree. There are lots of structures that were on that property, and some of them were very interesting.
More than one hotel.
Well, the Steamboat and Stage Hotel, and then there was a replacement hotel that followed that burned down, and
Yes.
and then the post office went up, and there may have been something even before those. So there have been a lot of structures on that site, and it's just possible that at some point some of us might decide it would be nice to have something commemorating those. But of course, as I say, there's been no discussion about it. I'm just climbing out on a limb.
Yes, of course.
Pardon me.
Yes, Judy?
I was just thinking that that's a good point. I think if we were going to do something with those thoughts in mind, it would be probably appropriate to do something like a storyboard where you would capture the history of all the things that had been there prior to it becoming a post office site. So, up until 1914, when it was actually chosen as a site, even though the post office wasn't actually built until 26, but the site was actually purchased for a future post office in 14. So, it would make some sense to do a storyboard, which would be probably outside of the post office. I can't see any other groups plaquing the post office for any reason, because we're the only group that does plaques, I think, in the town of Gravenhurst. So in fact, I don't think we'd run into a whole massive signage inside. I think we'd be talking about creating a storyboard with all of those things captured in one.
Yep. And then something like this inside.
Inside, yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, shocking. Randy has something.
So, Mr. Chair, where does it lead us regarding the plaque for the post office,
A plaque for the post office.
for the designated building? Now,
you wanna put
I'm going to go on a limb here too and say, looks to me like that one's got the old corporate logo, if you will.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, if you look at it, that's what that, we still have a few signs around town that have that on them as well, right? I think that's probably the old Gravenhurst. Yeah, it's,
We've had
well
more,
before
we've
your
had more
time.
than, we've had,
if you want to see now that when you drive in Winhara Road,
yes,
right where the town of Gravenhurst starts, and there's a sign that doesn't have our nice Gravenhurst Sigwin logo on it. It has the old corporate shield, if you will, or whatever, which I think that's what that is.
I didn't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. So, I guess that leads to my question, though, do we want, and we want to have a consistent look and feel, I think, of our plaques. We could design one anytime,
And if we
what we want
do,
it to
it
look
should have
like,
the new
because-
corporate seal or,
And, or not, it depends, or, it does say Town of Gravenhurst, but, again, I think we should have a consistent design to the plaques if we're gonna get into plaquing again. And maybe, I don't know what the others look like precisely. I know there's one on the train station. I believe there's a plaque outside the door there, if I'm not mistaken.
and there's one just down the street from what used to be the National Bank,
So,
Clipsham House?
Clipsham House, yes.
yeah,
Not
so,
outside, though,
No,
no.
not outside?
no, it's not.
Okay, so anyway, I just think if we're gonna start plaquing, we could, have a consistent design to the plaques, and that to me looks like perhaps an old one that we wouldn't use anymore, but, is there anything wrong with putting that inside the post office? No, we could put it inside the post office.
I think we should.
Yeah, so that was my original question, so where are we going with this
Yeah.
particular plaque and
Yeah.
the post office specifically? Any other thoughts?
Well, we've got one. They don't know it's the old crest. Let's stick it inside the lobby of the post office. Judy?
Considering that it was supposed to have been plaqued a number of years ago when that perhaps was not the old one. I think that it would be maybe appropriate to hang that inside the post office, because we have changed some things like our corporate logo and so on. It's quite a while ago that we were talking about plaquing that post office.
I did the unveiling.
Yeah, exactly, I was there. So that's quite a while ago that we did that. I
Quite a
don't
while
know,
ago.
when that actual logo changed, but I think it would be appropriate, since it was quite a while ago, to use that one, rather than spend money for no reason.
Yeah. I don't think I really don't think there's a need to get a new metal one at $400,
No,
but we can use that one. And they won't know the difference. So do we agree? Pardon me?
Do you need a motion or just consensus for Angela to continue?
I think a consensus would do it, and somebody here is going to contact the post office, and I'll go stick it on the wall. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next item then.
All right. So endeth VIII. Moving to IX, new business. New business? Anyone? Correspondence? Nil? Shall we agree whether or not there'll be a next meeting? It's proposed that the next meeting would be Tuesday, January the 14th, 2025. What, 3?
Oh, no, it is 4:30, it was just a typo.
Oh, excuse the typo.
It's been
Next meeting date, Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 4:30 in the PM. Do I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Mr. Silver? Second by Richard Tatley. All in favor? Press your buttons. 5 yes, 6 yes. Carried. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Merry Feast of the Epiphany.